The train station was unusually quiet that evening. A light drizzle tapped against the glass roof, and the smell of wet metal and dust mixed with the faint aroma of coffee from the platform stalls. A lone whistle cut through the silence, and the long train slowly crept into the station, its wheels screeching against the tracks. Inside the crowd, a young man named Armin walked with steady steps. He carried only one leather bag and a restless energy. The journey ahead would be long, an overnight ride across the country. He wasn't looking forward to the cramped seat, but there was no choice. Work had called him, and he had to travel. He found his compartment, slid the door open, and paused. There was someone already there. By the window sat a woman, perhaps in her mid-twenties, wearing a light blue dress that draped neatly across her knees. Her dark hair fell loosely over her shoulders, catching the dim compartment light. She wasn't looking at him, instead, she seemed lost in the world beyond the glass, where raindrops chased each other down in crooked lines. For a second, Armin wondered if he had stepped into the wrong compartment. She looked too graceful, too out of place for an ordinary train ride. "Excuse me," he said quietly, adjusting his grip on the bag. "This is seat 12, isn't it?" The woman turned, her eyes sharp and curious, and then softened into a small smile. "Yes. You're in the right place. I suppose we'll be sharing this compartment tonight." Armin nodded, feeling a strange warmth in her voice. He sat opposite her, setting his bag down by his feet. The train gave a sudden lurch, and with a groan of metal, it began to roll forward. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence was filled with the rhythm of wheels against the tracks and the distant horn that echoed through the night. But Armin kept finding his gaze drifting toward her. Something about the way she tapped her finger against the window, lost in thought, drew him in. Finally, she turned back to him, catching his eyes before he could look away. "Long journey for you?" she asked. He cleared his throat. "Yes. Overnight ride." "You?" "The same," she said. Her smile lingered for a moment longer than it needed to. "I didn't expect company. I usually prefer the quiet, but perhaps tonight will be different." Her words carried a weight he couldn't quite read, half casual, half suggestive. Armin chuckled softly. "Well, I'll try not to disturb you." "You don't seem like the disturbing type," she replied. The conversation drifted from there, light at first, about the rain, about traveling, about how trains had their own kind of magic. Her name was Zara. She spoke with a calm voice, but her eyes carried sparks, like she enjoyed testing how closely she could look at someone without breaking the moment. The hours slipped past more easily than Armin expected. The compartment felt smaller, warmer, as though the rest of the train no longer existed. Every small brush, the way their shoes accidentally touched under the table, the way she leaned slightly forward when speaking, felt amplified in the quiet space. At one point, the train jolted over a rough patch of track, and Zara lost her balance for a second. Her hand brushed against Armin's knee as she steadied herself. It was quick, accidental, yet his heartbeat stumbled in his chest. She pulled her hand back slowly, her lips curling into a faint smile, as if she had noticed the effect. The silence that followed wasn't empty anymore. It was charged. Outside, the rain grew heavier, drumming against the glass. Inside, the dim yellow light flickered softly, casting long shadows across their faces. Armin could feel temptation stirring, though no words had been spoken of it yet. When Zara finally leaned back against her seat, her gaze steady on him, she said in a low voice, "Funny how a stranger can feel less like a stranger when the night is long." Armin swallowed hard, knowing this journey would not be as simple as he thought. The train roared into the darkness, carrying them both towards something neither had planned but both were beginning to feel. The hours slipped into night. The train rushed through the darkness, cutting across fields, towns, and rivers unseen in the shadows. Inside the compartment, the air felt thick, as if every word between Armin and Zara carried more meaning than it should. The world outside no longer mattered. The rain was steady now, a soft sheet of sound against the windows, while the train's gentle sway lulled the rest of the passengers into sleep. But in their small space, the night felt wide awake. Zara leaned her head against the window, her hair falling in loose strands that caught the dim light. She studied Armin with quiet curiosity, her lips curling every now and then into a half smile, as though she knew a secret he didn't. "You travel often?" she asked, breaking the silence again. "Not really," Armin said. "Mostly for work." "You?" "Sometimes," she answered, tapping her fingers on the glass. "But this journey feels different. Maybe because I didn't expect conversation." Her eyes flickered toward him, holding just long enough for the words to hang heavy between them. Armin shifted slightly in his seat. He wanted to keep the exchange light, but something about her tone invited a deeper pull. "I didn't expect company either," he admitted. "But I can't say I'm disappointed." That earned him a quiet laugh, soft and rich. "Careful," she said playfully. "You might make the night interesting." The space between them seemed to shrink after that. Though the compartment had enough room, the train's dim light and the shadows stretching across the seats made it feel more intimate, like they were sharing a secret from the rest of the world. Zara pulled out a small book from her bag, flipping it open, though her eyes rarely touched the page. Instead, they returned again and again to Armin, as if she were more interested in his presence than her reading. "What do you do, Armin?" she asked after a while, closing the book without marking the page. "I'm an architect," he replied. "I spend most of my time with designs and drawings. Buildings that take years to stand." Her eyebrows lifted with intrigue. "So you shape spaces. Interesting. Maybe that's why this compartment suddenly feels different." Armin smiled at her words, unsure whether it was a compliment or another playful test. Zara had a way of speaking that wrapped simple lines in hidden layers. "And you?" he asked. "I'm in publishing," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Words are my world." But tonight, she let her voice trail off as she leaned forward slightly, her elbows resting on her knees. "I think I'd rather listen than read." Her gaze locked on him again, steady and unblinking. Armin felt warmth creeping through him, not from the train's heating, but from the way her eyes lingered on his face. The silence stretched, not awkward but electric. Their breath seemed louder in the quiet. The faint scent of her perfume drifted across the space, light and floral, mixing with the faint mustiness of the train. Another bump in the tracks jolted the carriage, and once more Zara's hand brushed his, this time on the seat between them. She didn't move it away immediately. Instead, her fingers lingered, the lightest of touches, as though testing the air. Armin froze, every nerve alive. He could have pulled his hand back, but he didn't. Neither did she. Finally, she drew her hand away, slow and deliberate, leaving behind a heat that spread through his skin. Her lips curved into a knowing smile, one that said she was aware of the effect she had. "Strange how quickly the night changes things," she whispered. Armin exhaled, steadying himself. "Or maybe it just shows what was already there." Zara tilted her head, her expression thoughtful yet playful. Maybe you're right. The train continued its endless rhythm, rocking gently as it sped deeper into the night. Outside, the rain softened into mist, and the glass reflected the faint glow of the compartment light. Inside, the air grew heavier, filled with the quiet hum of temptation unspoken. Every movement, her leaning closer, his glance lingering a moment too long, added to the silent conversation between them. Neither of them said it outright, but both felt it. The night had just begun, and so had something neither of them had expected when the journey started. The train carried on into the late hours, rolling through the unseen countryside. The rhythm of the wheels on the track became almost hypnotic, a steady beat beneath the quiet of the compartment. Most of the train was asleep by now. The lights in the corridor were dimmed, footsteps were rare, and the night belonged only to those still awake. Zara and Armin were among the few. Neither seemed ready for sleep. Zara shifted in her seat, pulling her legs slightly beneath her, curling against the corner by the window. The motion caused her dress to slide just enough to reveal the graceful line of her ankle, the soft curve of her calf. She noticed the way Armin's eyes flickered toward her before he quickly looked away. "You're too polite," she teased gently. Armin blinked, caught off guard. "Polite?" "Yes," she said with a light smile. "Most people would stare without shame. You look, but then you turn away as though you've done something wrong." His lips curved into a small grin. "Maybe I was raised better. Or maybe," she countered, her voice low, "you're trying too hard not to reveal what you feel." The words lingered in the air. Armin met her gaze, surprised by her boldness, but found himself unable to look away. The dim compartment light softened her features, yet her eyes held a spark that felt sharper, brighter than the world outside. "Perhaps," he admitted after a pause. Zara leaned forward slightly, her arms resting on the edge of her knees. The distance between them grew smaller, and in that closeness, the faint scent of her perfume returned, mixed now with the warmth of her presence. "Tell me," she said, tilting her head, "why does it feel like this train has shrunk? Like it's only this compartment, only us?" Armin let out a slow breath. "Maybe because it's easier to forget the world when it's moving so fast past the window." Her smile deepened. "Or maybe because some company is impossible to ignore." Silence followed, but it was not empty. Their eyes held the words they did not speak. A sudden whistle outside broke the moment. The train slowed, passing through a small station, though no one boarded their compartment. The flickering lights from the platform spilled in through the window for a brief moment before vanishing again into the dark. When the train picked up speed, it felt as though the night had sealed them back into their private world. Zara stretched her arms slightly, then leaned back in her seat. "Do you know," she said softly, "I almost took another train tonight. A later one. If I had, we wouldn't be sitting here now." Armin gave a quiet laugh. "Then I suppose I should be grateful for your change of plans." She looked at him carefully, her gaze steady, as though weighing the truth in his words. Then she let out a faint laugh of her own. "Grateful, interesting choice." The train swayed gently, and Zara's shoulder brushed against the edge of the window. She shifted again, and this time her knee brushed his under the table between them. Neither of them moved. The contact was light, casual enough to dismiss, but neither wanted to. Armin could feel the warmth spreading from that single point of touch, rising through him like a quiet flame. His heartbeat quickened, though he kept his expression calm. Zara noticed. Her lips curved into that same knowing smile she had worn earlier. "There it is again," she whispered. "What?" he asked, his voice lower now. That silence when something more could be said, she replied. Her words wrapped around him, daring him to speak, daring him to step across the invisible line between strangers and something else entirely. But before he could answer, the train jerked suddenly as it sped around a bend. Zara lost her balance, leaning forward, and for a moment, her hand landed on his. The touch was firm this time, steadying herself, but when the train straightened, she didn't pull away right away. Their hands stayed together, palm against palm, fingers close but not interlocked. The moment stretched, fragile and electric. Finally, she eased her hand back, her smile soft but unreadable. Strange how accidents don't always feel like accidents, she murmured. Armin swallowed, his chest tight with the weight of everything unsaid. The night was deep now, the world outside nothing but black fields and shadows. But inside the compartment, the spark had grown into something undeniable, filling every corner, every breath, every glance. And both of them knew the temptation was only beginning. The hours after midnight always felt different. The world outside the train was silent now, the rain long gone, leaving only the occasional flash of stars when the clouds broke apart. The train cut through the darkness like a secret, and inside their compartment, the silence between Armin and Zara carried more weight than any words. Neither of them had moved toward sleep. Their eyes were heavy, but their thoughts were alive, restless. Armin leaned back in his seat, staring at the ceiling light that flickered now and then, while Zara sat cross-legged, her chin resting lightly in her hand as she studied him. "You're quiet," she said after a long stretch. "Thinking," he admitted. "About what?" Armin hesitated, then answered honestly. "About how strange it is, that I feel like I've known you longer than just a few hours." Zara's lips curved, though her eyes softened. "Do you always speak so directly?" "Not always," he said with a faint laugh. "But something about this night makes it feel pointless to pretend otherwise." She leaned back, her gaze never leaving his. "I was thinking the same. Isn't it odd? A chance seat, a chance train, and suddenly the night feels different." Her voice dropped lower, slower, and the words seemed to echo inside him. Armin shifted forward slightly, resting his arms on his knees. Their faces were closer now than they had been all evening. "You believe in coincidence?" he asked. "I believe," she said carefully, "that some things are meant to happen. And when they do, you feel them in your bones." The train swayed gently, and with it, their knees brushed again. This time neither of them shifted away. The contact lingered, casual on the surface, but heavy underneath. Zara tilted her head, studying him with that same look she had worn since the beginning, curious, daring, almost playful. "Tell me, Armin," she whispered, "if the night ended right now, would you regret anything?" He swallowed, his voice quiet but steady. "Only that it ended too soon." Her smile deepened. For a moment, the compartment held nothing but the rhythm of their breaths and the steady beat of the wheels below. Then Zara rose slowly from her seat, stretching as though to ease her legs, but instead of settling back across from him, she crossed the small space and sat beside him. The cushion dipped beneath her weight, her shoulder brushing his arm. Armin froze, his pulse racing, but he didn't move away. The warmth of her nearness seeped into him, stronger than the train's heating, stronger than anything he'd felt all night. Zara tilted her head toward him, her hair brushing his shoulder. "Better," she said softly, almost to herself. The line between stranger and something more blurred completely in that moment. He could feel the heat radiating from her skin, smell the faint trace of her perfume, hear the subtle catch of her breath. Every detail pulled him deeper. "Zara," he began, his voice low. She turned her face toward his, their eyes locking in the dim light. "Don't overthink it," she whispered. The words carried a daring softness, a permission. The train rattled through the darkness, carrying them forward, but in that compartment, time seemed to slow. The world outside was endless and unseen, yet inside, everything narrowed to the inches between them. Zara leaned back against the seat, her arm brushing against his. Her eyes closed briefly, as if testing the comfort of the space, before opening again to find his gaze still on her. "Careful, Armin," she murmured with a faint smile. "You're starting to look at me like you don't want the night to end." He exhaled, a quiet laugh escaping. "Maybe because I don't." Their words were light, but their bodies told another story: the closeness, the lingering touches, the silence charged with unspoken meaning. The train carried them further into the night, and with every mile, the temptation deepened, drawing them into a place where decisions could no longer be delayed. Zara shifted again, her hand brushing against his as if by chance, though they both knew it wasn't. Their fingers rested side by side for a heartbeat, then two. Neither pulled away. The line had blurred and soon, it would disappear completely. The train pressed deeper into the night, its steady rhythm carrying them farther from the world they knew. The compartment was quiet, lit only by the soft, flickering bulb above them. Beyond the glass, the countryside stretched in endless darkness, but inside, the air was heavy, charged with the kind of silence that begged to be broken. Zara's hand rested close to Armin's, so close that the warmth of her skin seemed to radiate into his own. Neither had moved for a long moment, as though the fragile closeness between them would shatter if disturbed. Finally, Zara's fingers shifted, brushing lightly against his. A deliberate touch this time. Her eyes flicked up to meet his, daring him to pull away. He didn't. Instead, he turned his hand, letting his palm meet hers fully. Their fingers curled together, slow, deliberate, until their hands fit like they had been waiting for this moment. The train's sway deepened the intimacy, rocking them closer, shoulder to shoulder now. Armin could hear her breath quicken, though her expression remained calm, composed, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You don't seem like the type who takes risks," Zara murmured, her voice low, her words almost lost beneath the sound of the rails. Armin's lips curved into a smile. "Maybe you've changed that." Her laugh was soft, almost disbelieving, but it carried warmth. She leaned her head back against the seat, her hair brushing his shoulder. For a moment, they sat like that, joined hands, bodies touching, hearts racing in unison. Then Zara turned, her eyes locking onto his. The distance between them was only a breath now. "Do you ever wonder," she whispered, "why some moments feel heavier than others? Why they pull you in, no matter how much you try to resist?" Armin's throat tightened. "I don't think I want to resist." Her eyes softened at his honesty, though the playful spark never left them. Slowly, carefully, she leaned closer, until he could feel the warmth of her breath brushing his cheek. The world outside disappeared entirely. But just before their lips could meet, the train lurched again over a rough patch of track. The sudden jolt broke the moment, sending Zara back against the seat with a small laugh. "Perhaps the train wants us to wait," she teased, though her eyes told a different story, one of hunger, of temptation barely held in check. Armin chuckled, though his chest ached with the pause. "Or perhaps it wants us to be sure." Zara studied him, her expression softening, her voice quieter now. "And are you?" The question hung heavy. Armin's gaze dropped briefly to their joined hands, then back to her face. Yes. The word seemed to unlock something in her. She squeezed his hand once, firmly, before shifting closer, her body pressing lightly against his. The heat between them grew unbearable in its restraint. Every brush of her shoulder, every flicker of her eyes toward his lips, every shallow breath was a promise left unspoken. Armin, she whispered, almost to herself, as though testing how his name felt in the dark. He turned his face toward hers, their lips once more a breath apart. The tension stretched, a fragile thread that could snap at any second. Then, as if both had silently agreed, the thread broke. Their lips met in a soft, lingering kiss, tentative at first but deepening with every heartbeat. The world outside rushed by, unseen and forgotten, while inside the compartment, the night burned alive with closeness. When they finally parted, breathless, Zara leaned her forehead lightly against his. Her voice trembled with quiet laughter. So much for waiting. Armin smiled, brushing his thumb against her hand. Some things aren't meant to wait. The train rolled onward, carrying them through the night, while inside, the line they had danced around for hours was gone. What remained was heat, temptation, and the knowledge that the journey had become something far more than either had expected when the night began. The compartment had changed. The dim light, the quiet rhythm of the train, and the darkness outside had transformed it into a private world where only Armin and Zara existed. The first kiss lingered between them, leaving heat and longing in its wake, a promise of more that neither wanted to deny. Zara leaned back against the seat, her fingers still intertwined with his. She smiled softly, her lips brushing his hand. "You're not like anyone I've ever met," she whispered. Armin's thumb traced gentle circles over the back of her hand. "Neither are you," he replied, his voice low. He could feel the pull of her warmth, the soft curve of her shoulder against his. Every movement, every glance, sent a ripple of desire through him. For a moment, they simply sat together, letting the silence fill the space between them. But the tension was different now, no longer restrained by hesitation. It simmered, waiting to be acknowledged. Zara shifted closer, her knee brushing his once more. This time, he didn't flinch. The small contact, casual but deliberate, sent a shiver through him. Her eyes met his, dark and inviting, a silent question passing between them. "You're thinking about it," she murmured. He swallowed, the truth too strong to hide. "I can't stop thinking about it." Her lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. "Nor can I." The train swayed gently, the motion pulling them even closer. Armin's arm moved almost without thought, resting lightly behind her on the seat. She leaned into the space, letting the warmth of their bodies brush together, the simple contact igniting the air between them. Zara tilted her head, her hair falling over her shoulder, brushing his arm. "Strange," she whispered, "how close we've become in such a short time." Armin's gaze dropped to her lips and back to her eyes. "Some things don't need time," he said. Her breath caught, soft and unsteady. Slowly, deliberately, she leaned toward him, closing the last fraction of space between them. Their lips met again, firmer this time, exploring, tasting, discovering the desire that had been building all night. The compartment seemed to shrink further, every sound, the train's rhythm, their shallow breaths, the soft rustle of clothing amplified, creating an intimacy that felt both thrilling and inevitable. When they finally parted, even briefly, Zara's forehead rested against his chest. The warmth of his heartbeat beneath her cheek grounded her, made the moment real. I never expected this, she whispered, voice husky. Neither did I, Armin admitted, brushing a strand of hair from her face. But I'm glad it happened. Her hand slid up to rest lightly on his chest, tracing the lines of his shirt, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. It feels dangerous, she murmured. Or exciting, he countered softly. Zara's lips curved into a playful, yet sultry smile. A little of both. The night stretched on. Every glance, every brush of skin, every quiet laugh or whispered word drew them closer, the temptation growing stronger. Neither spoke of stopping, neither needed to. The compartment, the night, and the train itself seemed to conspire to keep them together, pressed close, drawn into each other's orbit. Armin tilted his head, his lips brushing against her temple, his breath warm against her skin. Zara, he whispered, his voice low, filled with the weight of the moment. She lifted her face to his, her eyes dark, her lips slightly parted. Yes. His hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing softly. I don't want this night to end. Her eyes softened, a quiet intensity in their depths. Neither do I, she admitted, leaning forward again. Their lips met, this time with no hesitation, no restraint. The kiss deepened, slow and consuming, and the world outside ceased to exist. The train continued to race through the night, but inside, time had paused. In that small compartment, Armin and Zara surrendered to the temptation, the attraction, and the unspoken promises of the hours ahead. The compartment had grown warmer, charged with a heat that had little to do with the train's heating system. Armin and Zara were no longer sitting opposite each other, no longer maintaining polite distance. They were side by side now, shoulders brushing, hands intertwined, every movement deliberate and slow, as though even a slight shift could shatter the fragile magic of the night. The first blush of dawn had not yet touched the horizon, but the dim glow of the compartment light painted their faces in soft gold. Outside, the world was still dark, quiet, and unseen. Inside, their breaths mingled, slow and steady, hearts beating in tandem as though the night itself had claimed them. Zara tilted her head, resting it lightly against Armin's shoulder. Her fingers traced gentle patterns across his chest, and he felt every brush like a spark. This feels impossible, she whispered. Impossible, Armin repeated softly, but it feels right. Her lips curved into a faint, mischievous smile. Dangerous, too, she added, letting her hand slip closer to his arm, feeling the warmth of his skin. Armin leaned down, his lips brushing the top of her head. Maybe the danger is part of the thrill. The words drew a soft laugh from her, a sound that made his chest tighten. Then, almost instinctively, she tilted her face up to him, eyes half-lidded, inviting. Their lips met again, softer this time, lingering, tasting, exploring. It was no longer just temptation, it was surrender, mutual and undeniable. The train swayed gently, and they adjusted instinctively, pressing closer without words. Every touch, every brush of skin against skin, carried unspoken confessions. Neither spoke of restraint. Neither needed to. Zara's hands moved to frame his face, thumb brushing along his jaw, pulling him closer. Armin's hands rested lightly on her waist, holding, grounding, connecting. Their kisses deepened, slow and unhurried, a dance of desire that had been building all night and now found release in quiet intimacy. Outside, the first streaks of sunlight began to smear across the sky, though neither noticed. The world outside the compartment had ceased to exist. Here, in the small space, only the rhythm of the train and the beating of their hearts mattered. When they finally parted for a breath, their foreheads rested together, eyes locked. A soft sigh escaped Zara, a mixture of relief, contentment, and lingering anticipation. "I didn't expect this," she murmured. "Neither did I," Armin admitted, brushing his lips against her temple. "But some nights, they're not meant to be planned." Her fingers tightened slightly around his, a small but telling grip. "And some meetings feel inevitable," she whispered. Armin smiled softly, leaning back just enough to look into her eyes fully. "Then maybe we're exactly where we're meant to be." The train's rhythmic motion, the dim light, and the lingering scent of each other's presence made the compartment feel infinite, yet intimate. Every glance, every touch, every subtle movement was a declaration of connection, of desire, of something that went beyond a fleeting encounter. Zara tilted her head again, brushing her lips lightly against his. "I don't want to forget this," she said softly. "Nor I," Armin replied. "This night, it will stay with me." They stayed close, hands still intertwined, foreheads touching, sharing the quiet intimacy that came after surrendering to temptation. Neither spoke again for a while, letting the moment stretch, letting it sink in, letting the world beyond the train remain distant and irrelevant. Eventually, the train slowed as it neared the next station. The morning light began to creep through the windows, pale and soft. The magic of the night lingered, though the edges of reality began to return. Zara leaned her head against his shoulder one last time. "Promise me," she whispered, voice gentle, "that we won't let this end with the night." Armin tightened his grip around her hand. "I promise," he said firmly. "Whatever comes next, this, us, will not be forgotten." As the train pulled into the station, they rose slowly, reluctant to break the closeness they had built. The compartment door opened, light spilling in, the world outside awaiting. But inside, a connection had been forged, one that would survive beyond the train, beyond the night, beyond chance. And as they stepped out together, hands still intertwined, the memory of that night, the temptation, the surrender, the intimacy stayed with them, a quiet fire that neither would ever forget. The journey had ended, but the story between Armin and Zara was only beginning.